Hi, welcome back for our second CEC Quick Takes. I'm here today with Daniel McNulty, and he's agreed to do an online instruction during COVID-19, everything you need to know about accessibility. And let's face it, this is going to be a crash course. I'm really excited to have Daniel with me today. If you are on Twitter, Daniel and I are pretty active on Twitter. The PATINS community, they have a Twitter chat every Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern. Daniel's been the director of the PATINS project for 8 years, and he's been a member of our community for over 20. So Daniel, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure, Kelly.
Awesome. So little quick caveat, Daniel's also my husband. So we do this work, we're partners in crime. All right, the next slide. All right, so today we're hoping to share with you tidbits, a brief overview. If you're new to online instruction, you might feel a little overwhelmed. We want to give you just a brief overview to accessibility to online. The second thing we're going to address is captioning, or how we can make sure that those text objects and also images are accessible when you're dealing with online instruction. And then we're going to give you a few quick tips on how to make some things that are accessible to your students right with their fingertips. So let's get started.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And I just want to emphasize that this is a simplistic overview of accessibility for teachers who might be new to moving to online instruction. In these 10 minutes, we won't get through everything, but we do have an extensive list of resources available at the end. And I also want to encourage everybody to definitely consult with your district's administration, as well as your informational technology and assistive technology leadership.
Awesome. So as we've been doing this work, we've been taking a look at some of the hot and burning questions. So these are all rooted in the law. So Daniel, give us a quick overview of that.
Sure, this is best practice, but it's definitely also rooted in the law. And when we talk about the law, we're really talking about civil rights, as well as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG 2.0 guidelines, and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, and one of my favorite phrases ever is accessibility and substantially equivalent ease of use. And when we talk about that, I first would like to make sure people understand what I mean when I say access, because that can mean different things to different people, and access to whom is always the question to ask. And then substantially equivalent ease of use comes from a piece of legislation from the Department of Justice in 2010, and it talks about if typically developing peers, it takes maybe 3 steps to get to the content, interact with it, and respond to it, then it should also take about 3 substantially equivalent steps for somebody with a disability to get to the content, interact with it, and respond to it. So if it takes me 10 more steps to make a document accessible for myself, that's not substantially equivalent.
Awesome. And so in the community, we have been getting hundreds of questions. And one of the biggest hot and burning questions right now is captioning required for all class meetings held virtually?
Sure, and that's an important question, and the easy answer to that one is a resounding yes, absolutely required. And that has to do with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 to be required to be captioned both live and recorded for all video content. The National Association of the Deaf, or NAD, has filed a series of lawsuits against school systems for not having video content accessible via captions. And it's also just a good practice for all students. And we've had presentations in the past where we've just been presenting, and then halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, a teacher will come up and say, hey, thank you for live captioning that because I do have a hearing impairment. Or we've had somebody actually walk in who was deaf halfway through the session, and it's a good thing we were already doing the live captions. And so there's lots of different tools and resources available to help educators do this. One of them is, I'll demonstrate right now, is when you're using Google Slides, captions are built in, and you simply have to be in presentation mode in your Google Slides. And then when you're in that present mode, if you hover over the bottom of the screen, there's a toolbar that comes up, and right about in the middle of that toolbar, there's a button that says Captions. And I'll try to bring that up and see if I can zoom in on it a little bit. And you simply click that, and when I do that, the live captions appear here on the screen, which I'll demonstrate. they're pretty good. They're not perfect. Sometimes they get a word wrong here and there. But Kelly, what happens when people are looking for the wrong word in there?
They're paying attention and their eyes are scanning text. So with the brain being able to take in text in multiple formats, you're actually having more time on task, and the potential for students that may struggle with reading have more access to reading.
Absolutely. We know the greatest predictor of reading growth is time spent reading. And so if students are reading my words to try to find the thing that it gets wrong, they're spending time reading, which is pretty cool. So we have a lot of free resources available to you. One of those is the live captioning built into Google Slides. Some other things to keep in mind is that videos should not automatically start by playing or loop. They should be able to be selected to start playing by the user. And the video command buttons must be present and accessible. And also audio descriptions should describe nonverbal content in a video. So if there's things that are happening that are conveying meaning in a video that are nonverbal, we've got to have audio descriptions available for those. So I showed you Google Slides real quick. Also YouTube, uploading a video into YouTube will automatically try to caption it. And again, it's probably not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty close. And with YouTube, you also have the ability to go back in and make edits to those captions. And that costs nothing. There's two resources that are not free that PATINS uses. One is called a la carte, and we use that for live captioning services for big events that we host and that are live. And we also use a company called Rev, and that's rev.com, and we put those in the resources at the end of this as well. We use Rev to caption longer videos for us for a cost.
Awesome. So let's take a look at hot and burning question number 2. So a lot of folks have been asking if I sent paper packets to my class, if I just scan those and post those paper packets to my class learning management system, since this is what I sent home to the rest of the students, is this okay?
And the question there is really to ask accessible to whom? Is it okay for whom? Because for some people, sending home a paper packet might be perfectly accessible. For other people, it might not be accessible at all. And so I always like to have people refer back to what's in the IEP when in question. Are there things in some students' IEPs that might indicate that this is not accessible to them? And something might be, if they use a text to speech, if they use a read aloud accommodation in their IEP, then sending home a paper packet might not be as accessible to them. But I always encourage people to ask the question, accessible to whom? And let's imagine all the possibilities of who could be trying to access this at home. And so especially right now with the extended distance learning and the e-learning going on, in addition to referring back to the IEP, I like to encourage people to know that their students' parents and families are likely going to be supporting that work, because the teachers and the paraprofessionals aren't there, of course. So it really is best practice to think about what's accessible to them as well. Is it accessible if the parents and the families can't see it? Is it accessible if they can't read? Is it accessible if they don't read English, etc.? So in that sense, sending home a paper packet might be accessible to some students. It's not going to be accessible to any students or families who need those sorts of accommodations.
And so if I scan those things, maybe the image from the original document, maybe that PDF could absolutely have reader ability, being able to drop down and read that PDF with my ears. If we're just taking a picture of those things, there's a lot of guidelines as to if this thing that you just posted online, even if it was the same exact. I think that's where the conversation is like, well, what I'm giving to gen ed, I'm giving it to special ed. And so therefore it must be okay. Well, it's not if it's not accessible to the student receiving it. So
Right.
I have some paraprofessionals that have been making phone calls and saying, go to page 1, let's put our eyes on the text and talk about that. So page 1, and they're reading aloud. So they're making things that are in paper format also accessible if they don't have the internet.
Right, yeah, good point. And that's the difference between equity and equality, right? So equity is every student getting what they need, not everybody getting the same thing. And so you're exactly right. Taking a photo or a scan of a paper document and sending that home most likely yields inaccessible text, meaning it's a picture of text, it's not real text. And so I just had this question yesterday, actually, or I mean on Friday, when the when this comes up, I encourage folks to refer back to the original source of the PDF. So probably that came from a digital origination, meaning a teacher created it in Microsoft Word or created it in, I was working with somebody on Friday who was creating things in InDesign, or they created them in Google Docs. So there was probably an original digital creation version of that PDF paper printout that you can go back to and export that in a more accessible way. So for example, Microsoft Word can export things as a PDF in a very accessible way. So if it was created as a worksheet or a quiz or a study guide in Microsoft Word, for example, we can go right to that and export that as a PDF, but it's accessible, which is way different than taking a picture of a text and a picture of a printout and then sending that as a PDF. So then if we do have those though, if we have PDFs that are not accessible, we have this thing called optical character recognition, or OCR. And Google Docs is one free option to do that. And if you have a picture of text, you can upload that into your Google Drive. And then when it's in your Google Drive, so you have a JPEG or a PNG, whatever that digital picture of text is, and we right click on it, and then you choose Open with Google Docs. So you're opening a picture of text with Google Docs, which does automatic OCR, or optical character recognition, on it and turns it back into real text. And so it does a pretty good job.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we're thinking about these few tips. So when Daniel and I got together to talk about this, he said there's some basic things that folks can do. Daniel, will you refer to the 3 things that you said people can do to make sure that they're doing this in an easy way?
Sure, and there's a lot more to this. So these are 3 quick basic tips. Again, you can refer to the list of resources at the end for a more extensive version. But a few things to really keep in mind here is color and contrast, which is an easy thing to do. And so it's real easy to try to get fancy with colors and make things look exciting and engaging. And as a general rule of thumb, the more we do that, the less accessible documents become. And so that's a hard thing for some teachers to get out of the habit of doing, but it's pretty important. And there's a link here that we'll also put at the end for an accessible colors contrast checker. So you should have a certain level, a certain ratio of contrast between your background and your text. And then another thing to keep in mind is that color alone shouldn't indicate meaning. So what that means is if I've got a document, I shouldn't say to the students, hey, do this with all of the things in blue, or all of the things in green mean this, because somebody who's colorblind or sees colors a little differently loses access to that immediately. So for anything that we want to indicate meaning with, the good rule of thumb is we should have 2 indicators for it. So it could be blue, but then we could also have a triangle next to it. So all the blue things or triangle things mean this. All the green things or square things mean this. All the red things or circles mean that. And then also when we're putting hyperlinks in digital documents, they should be descriptive hyperlinks. They shouldn't say things like click here. Because if we have 10 of those on a page, click here, click here, click here, the user who isn't able to see that doesn't have any idea where they're going if they're using a screen reader. It just says click here, click here. So it should say hyperlinks should be descriptive, and then that whole sentence would be a hyperlink to a page on making hyperlinks descriptive, for example. And then hyperlinks should also be a different color and underlined. So the typically blue is the color for hyperlinks, and then they should also be underlined, which implies that you should try to avoid underlining other things in your document. Reserve underlining for hyperlinks so that it's consistent. And then the last thing there to keep in mind is to proof and test your materials for accessibility. And we'll have that link at the end in the resources as well, to run it through an accessibility checker. You can run it through whether it's a website or a document, and it'll give you specific things to fix.
Awesome. That's really a free, awesome tool as well. All right, so now you're going to model this a little bit for us for thinking of creating access right at our fingertips. And this is something Daniel and I did just yesterday.
Yeah, we did this yesterday for a friend of ours who loves music and is trying to find a way to get him more independent in initiating his own music in his home, especially during these times. He's got an Amazon Alexa at his house. So we thought, here's a free way. He's already got the Alexa. This is a free way to do it. So still thinking of our friend who loves music, but needs some sort of synthetic speech to activate his Amazon Alexa device. So this is simply a Google Doc that's been opened up, and the commands for the Alexa typed into it And then we're just going to use the built-in text-to-speech on the iPhone to talk to the Alexa.
Echo, play country music.
Play pure country music from Apple Music.
So that's pretty simple and worked really well. And the other way of doing that is the student is nonverbal and already has a communication device. They could program these things into their communication device as well, right, Kelly?
Awesome, absolutely. And so we were just thinking of ways that are inexpensive and at your fingertips, things that you already have, because a lot of our families that are experiencing this COVID at home social distancing, they don't have all of the expensive tools that maybe, some other kids have. So parents really want to know how to create access within their homes. And this is one simple way to do that if they're already using some basic tools that are open on the market. One of the last things we really wanted to take a look at was this idea of a teacher moment. How can we remember all of these things? So just like our mini webisode number 1, our quick takes, we came up with an acronym. This one is not mine, I borrowed it from the, I'll say it wrong, but the WEC version 2 accessibility guidelines. And so this acronym is called POUR. And I said, pour yourself some access. So that's my fun spin on it. But so the P really stands on perceivable. Are the things in which you're presenting, whether they're online or in paper format, are they really able to be accessed by the person you're intending? And if they're not, then we have to think of a different way to do that. Operable. Are we able to operate and use the interface? In our very first CEC webinar, we talked about what things are you already using with your students, and do they know how to access those things? So if we're trying to get really complicated at this time, I say less is more. Let's dial it way back and think, what things do the students already have access to that they've been doing when they were in the brick and mortar building, so that we're not adding another layer to their confusion, because that's going to be really important at this time. And are things understandable? So we might have created really fun things, even choice boards. If our choice boards are not labeled in a way that we understand what's supposed to be accomplished Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, people are going to feel overloaded and stressed and not do any of it. So it needs to be simple to navigate and to understand. And then, are these things robust? What that means is currently I'm on a laptop, another student could be on an iPad, another family could be using their cell phone. So if you're presenting content on any platform, are these things accessible on multiple types of devices or in that paper version? So we want to be thinking of, is this thing that we're presenting or sharing, choice boards, whatever it may be, can our students access those?
Yeah, and so we've heard a lot lately about this concept of Zoom bombing, folks coming into your Zoom rooms, your meetings or your classes, your trainings, who aren't welcome. And so we had this happen to us last week, actually, and we've realized a couple of things, a few things that can help with this. First thing is all teachers need to be mindful of their students' safety. And one thing to definitely keep in mind is to not post recorded videos of your students' faces and their names together, which is really important. But beyond that, consider password protecting your live meetings, requiring a password for folks to get in. Create a waiting room, which creates a list of people who aren't able to get into the public room space yet. And this is kind of what saved us on Friday. We had people there who didn't belong, and we just simply didn't let them into the real room. Consider muting your participants upon entry and disabling screen sharing for participants, and just keep that available for hosts. Keep your Zoom installation updated, because Zoom is definitely aware of some of the security things that are going on, and they're constantly working to upgrade and update that. I do think that's a priority, and I think they're working hard to make that happen. So keep your Zoom updated so you have the latest versions. And there's a lot more resources for suggestions of things you can do to increase your security at the end.
And that brings us to the end. So we appreciate you joining us. I was super excited to get to work with my brilliant husband, and also all the folks at CEC. Keep those questions rolling into the community, because we are watching and we have a responsive team trying to make sure that you have the best and greatest latest tips as COVID-19 extends. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Daniel, as well, for your expertise.
Thanks.